topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Legacy Leavers series on Success Secrets Exposed. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time or Wednesday mornings in Australia on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. The series showcases experts, changemakers, and disruptors leaving a lasting legacy with those sharing their wisdom with the world.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, and welcome to another episode of Success Secrets Exposed. Our topic today is Align with Life in Wild, Willing, and Wise Ways. And that title in itself gives me goosebumps. So today we're actually honoured to have a truly inspiring guest with us today, HeatherAsh Amara. Heather Ash is the celebrated author of 9 books, including the best-selling book Warrior Goddess Training, The 7 Secrets of Happy and Healthy Relationships, and her highly anticipated new release, Wild, Willing, and Wise. Her teachings are transformative, guiding individuals to move from self-judgment to discernment, from victimhood to authentic vulnerability. She empowers people to shed their limiting beliefs and ground themselves in self-intimacy, steadiness, and stillness. She was raised in Southeast Asia and has travelled the world since childhood, drawing inspiration from the diverse beauty of human experience and expression. This is going to be an open-hearted, inclusive worldview, which you will see that permeates through her writings and her teachings and the conversation that we're going to have today. So please help me welcome to the show, HeatherAsh.
Hi, Sally. Hey, everyone. So good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with your wisdom and your legacy that you're leaving with the world. We're greatly appreciative that you're able to join us today. So thank you.
Of course.
I would love to start by asking you, as somebody that's actually already crafting a significant legacy, how did you actually start and how do you express, I suppose, this legacy when people ask you, what do you do?
I really started when I had a mentor that asked me this simple question of what do you really want to do? If you could do anything, what do you really want to do? And I had secret desires for a long time, but I said to her, I just want to teach full time. I don't want to be working part-time with other people. I want to teach full time. And I'd already been teaching for 15 years part-time. And her enthusiasm and support allowed me to make that leap to running a business, becoming an entrepreneur, teaching full time, starting up centers in Austin and in Berkeley in the United States, and now in New Mexico. And just was an incredible launch into following through on the dream that I'd had for a really long time about creating a way for people to really land in themselves and be loved through the process of transformation.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love the way that you talked about that launch, because I can feel, I suppose, the build up and the excitement and the anticipation of such a big launch. And was it a big, it sounds as though it was like a big, eruptive, exciting launch of lots of big things, or was it very incremental?
I'd say it was both. And, so often when things look like they're huge, there's a million little things that lead up to it. And that was definitely my life, being a business manager for other entrepreneurs, being a publicist, learning how to build websites, all the little things that didn't look connected at the time. That when I started to teach full time, were just like all the things that I needed. And I was really blessed because I had somebody walk me through a building and be like, I always thought this building should be a center. And both of us looking at each other and like, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
So there's always been also other humans in the expansion.
Yeah, so that's serendipitous, right time, right place, right energy, and away it goes. Isn't it interesting how when we look back and join the dots of life and those serendipitous moments, how interconnected and how everything just sort of, as you said, incrementally builds in preparation for the next big wave. So yeah, that's exciting to hear. So thank you for sharing that. So part of the conversation that we're going to be talking about is, I'm going to call them cycles in business, and with my audience, we talk about a 90-day run based on planning out things. So that's got more of a planned approach. But when I was reading and we've been talking, you were talking about I'm going to just call them the energy cycles, and then open it up to you to just expand on that for us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I started researching for this current book, I got really curious about these cycles of what have been traditionally called maiden, mother, crone. So that young energy of new beginnings and exploration and play, and then the mother energy of when we start building something and nurturing something and putting our energy into birthing something. And then the crone, which is about then big picture view. Like, I think about the crone energy as like resting into your wisdom and being able to share that energy with others. And I was exploring these cycles, I realized that I wanted to create something that was applicable to a lot of people and that made sense. And so that's when I brought those three energies into wild, which is the like, let's try new things, let's explore, let's see what works. That is so important in business, right? Where you have the idea and you're like, I don't know how we're going to do this, but let's do it. And there's the excitement and the willingness to stumble and make mistakes because you're so on fire with something. That spark has been lit inside of you. And then there's a point where you've got to be willing. So the willing energy is about now, like, all right, now I got to raise this thing. Like, I birthed this thing. And now what do I do? Yes. And the amount of nurturing and sustaining and resilience that's needed when you're building something, and that cycle is about sustainability, learning how to be sustainable. And I think about these three energies in relationship to fire as like that first energy, the wild energy is the spark. The willing energy is the fire that you have to feed, and that you also have to watch like what's not feeding that fire, what's actually dampening the fire. And that there's that learning. And then the third energy, which is wise, which is now being able to step back and look at, okay, what do I actually want to go forward? What's the legacy really? And what do I want to go forward with the legacy? What do I want to drop? What do I not want to take forward? And that's the coal. So when you have a wood stove, if you want to keep the coals going overnight, right, you dampen the oxygen down and all the energy goes into the coals. And so that's for me is what the wise energy. It's that you're like here and you're radiating that heat, but that you're just being it fully. Yeah.
So a word that keeps coming up as you're expressing that, and as I was doing my reading and research through those cycles, and I love that spark, that fire and energy. That's sort of, I suppose, the birthplace of the entrepreneur. But when you, if I look back at my own life, is when you're in that fire and that spark energy, the courage. You've got a different level of courage. You sort of don't get quite so stuck in the how. And then when you get to that next cycle, you sort of you're still courageous, but it's a different type of courageous. So can I ask you just share some wisdom as it relates to how that courage sort of ebbs and flows across those energies? Because I'm feeling it to be quite different.
Absolutely. So I think that the wild energy, just like you said, like there's so much just enthusiasm and raw power at that point, right? It's like, it's such a fun part of the cycle. Like, yay, we're building stuff. And it's like falling in love. Like everything's possible. We can make this happen. And that's beautiful. And then it needs a foundation underneath it.
Yeah.
And it takes courage to start something. And I think it takes, like you said, like a really different courage to keep going, even when it doesn't appear to be working, when it's difficult, when you're scared, when like you've been up with the kid and the kid's been sick all night, and then you've got to like do the next thing. Like when you're balancing all the rest of your life and figuring out, how do I keep going? That's such a huge courage. And most people, like the initial like burst is really fun.
Yeah.
But it's not so sexy and fun to like keep feeding the fire in the middle of the night when it's cold.
You're doing you're sort of doing those sort of foundations on the ground sort of things. Yes, you're building, but it's much more sort of focused like that versus sort of expansion, excitement, focused out that. So that is a very different energy. And I suppose depending on the length of time, that's where that you touched on the word resilience, having the courage and the resilience to continue through that.
Yes.
Yeah, I really wanted to sort of expand on that, because I think that we all get the creative spark. That's, as you said, that's fun. That's the fun stuff. But an entrepreneur's journey is often a roller coaster ride. So it's, how do we continue to craft the right sort of energies for ourselves as we go through those second stages, the foundational stages, and then you've come out the other end, and then the legacy almost hits you in the head, so to speak, because you go, right, now that's okay, now I get it, that's what I'm here for, let's get rid of those things, let's continue with these things, etc. So I think that's really important for people to be aware of.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too that word willing is so powerful, because in the word willing shows you may not know how, but you're willing.
Yeah.
And that's,
and again, letting go of attachments, isn't it? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Beautiful. So I'd like to ask now, I would love to talk about this literal big river and the 12-foot waves and the river that eats boats, that is sort of the backbone, so to speak, of this up-and-coming book. So I'm going to let you go wild and tell me a little bit more about that story and that journey.
Absolutely. Well, when I was crafting the book, I'm such a fire person. Like, all my metaphors are fire. And I thought, I'm gonna stretch. Like, what if I do a different metaphor? And this story came to mind, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. And as I wrote about it more, like, it just, like, so many lessons were embodied in this experience I had. And I was invited by my then husband and his dad with a bunch of other people to go raft down the Grand Canyon. And I really did not know what I was getting into. I just said, yes, this sounds fun. Yes. And I watched a video the day before we got on the river, and it was a 2-week trip, maybe 3 weeks. It was a long trip. So I'm watching this video and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. How big is that boat? And they're like, it's about 16 feet. And I'm like, or 18 feet. I'm like, so you're telling me that wave is 18 feet? And they're like, yeah, that's about right. Because literally it was this boat going into the trough and coming up and being literally, like, not exaggerating, like this, cresting and then going down and doing this over and over again. And I'm like, what? Like, my brain just shut off. And they're like, yeah, that's where we're going.
Yes.
What's really interesting about this story is that we were in for maybe 3 or 4 days, and the boat got flipped by a tiny little wave. We weren't anywhere near that particular rapids called Lava, which is like day 13 or something.
Yep.
So I had the experience of being in this incredibly huge river, which is terrifying. And what happened through, like, reviewing that experience and writing about it, which was so fun, because I also got to cuss and, like, be really funny, which I'm usually pretty serious in my books. And when I started writing Wild, Willing, and Wise, I was like, nobody needs serious right now. It was in the middle of the pandemic. I'm like, we need some lightness. I need some lightness. I need some play, and also some good ways to navigate. And that's what I started to realize. Like, being on a boat is such a great metaphor for life, because there's rapids, there's still places, there's places to play, but you've got to know what to do when. And that's where those three energies come in.
Timings, yeah. And that was when I was reading through that, like you, I do yes, let's just say yes, and then go, oh, crap. Not quite what I thought. So I could feel all of that. And then reading through the other bits and the comments from some of the readers that have had the opportunity to read the book early, it's obviously been very, very profound. But one of the other, there was another saying in it that cropped up a couple of times, which was the only way out is through. So I'll ask you to expand on that, please.
Absolutely. Yeah, I came up with 7 lessons from the river. And one of the big ones is the realization when I got partway through, because that was like the wild was, yay, let's go. And the willing was, oh, I got to learn how to ride the river. Like I realized when we got flipped, because I'd been super like casual, like, yeah, I'm on the river with these 2 experts who'd been riding rivers their whole life. And I was like, oh, just because you're an expert doesn't mean you're not going to capsize. And so that brought me to like, I need to learn how to read the river. And there was a moment where we were getting closer to lava, to that really, really big rapid, when I realized there's no way out of this. Like, there's no way you cannot climb out. And I'm like, isn't that a great metaphor for life? Like, you're on the river. The way out is through. You keep going. And that's the willingness. Like, I'm scared. I don't know how to do this, but I'm willing to keep going and learn as I go along.
Yeah. And that when I was reading that, and as you said, there's no escape because the sides are like this, that willingness to go through and to read the river is that sort of that second stage of that entrepreneur journey where you need that courage and resilience and dare I say the awareness of understanding of what's sort of going on. Would that be in 2 levels, both at that sort of ground level or the river water level, as well as what's going on with the environment, with the people that you're in? So you've sort of got that helicopter view and that on the ground view.
Yeah, that's so accurate. And I think that, being an entrepreneur, being a leader is really about learning how to read both the river of like, what's the undercurrents of what's happening in the culture, in the community, in the world at the time, and that understanding there's places where there's eddies, there's places where it moves really quickly, there's places where you've got to not paddle, and also the environment that you're in and the people that you're with, and that we're working to work as a team. It doesn't work if one person's paddling that way and the other person's paddling this way. You all have to be know where you're going, know how to read the river, and learn how to paddle together. Yeah. And that's a skill.
Very much so. And I love that I think you called them river rats. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Have I got that correct? Yeah. So I related and resonated to a lot of it because my dad was a fisherman. So we've been we call them dinghies in Australia, and done lots of not rivers like yours. Ours is still, let me just say they're still, compared to the rapids that you guys have had on that journey. But I do remember having my mother in the boat, who was terrified of being in a boat, didn't like being on the water, and had that panic that would wiggle the boat. And Dad and I having to sort of go, Dad we'd literally be on opposite sides of the boat, just keeping the boat steady because Mum was so wriggly. And, I sort of, when I thought of that, I thought of there was your comments of how you hadn't done that before, but you were with the experienced person. So you've almost like an entrepreneur or hires when an entrepreneur hires their first person, and that first hire is sort of thrown into the end, and you've got these experienced people that know what they're doing, and this person comes in and is here to be a help, but they're a little bit disruptive to start. I saw the analogies of how that was. So how was that experience for you as you got that through that first day, and then as you sort of moved on? How did your awareness change, and how did you adapt at speed?
It was really joyful because it was like learning something new. And at first it was really frustrating, honestly, because I'm with super skilled people that are like, well, the river's doing this. And I'm like, I don't see it. Like, I don't see what it's doing. And just having enough patience and willingness to stay with it and to listen to what I was being told and to try and take it in until one day I was like, oh, I think I see the way it's moving. I think I see, and really it's learning to read. So it's learning a new skill. And I think that's something that when we're in business, that those of us that have the skill need to pass that skill down or forward, however you want to think about it. And that the person that's learning it needs time. They need a lot of spaciousness to figure it out. And I think that's a place where I see entrepreneurs sometimes get frustrated is they're like, I hired this person. Why aren't they like just jumping into the boat and being able to paddle? And it's like, because they're learning the culture, they're learning what's important to you, they're learning a new skill. And to have that grace to realize you're the one teaching them. They're not the problem, you are. Actually.
I love you've used that word grace, because we often talk about in the business that I have, we often, when I'm talking to other consultants and they're getting their first hire on to help them expand their business, etc., they often, I'd say to them, I know you're going to expect a brain transplant here, but this person is not going to get up to speed. They've got potential fears coming in. You're new, the environment's new, they've got to learn all those different learnings. And I love that you use the word spaciousness and grace, because you've actually got to give them space to blossom and grow, so they can then do what is required and to help their people, help them grow, etc.
So true.
Yeah, I've got another, there was another question that you talked about. Actually, no, it was the word that just came up then. You used the word joy. And there was one of the readings, and I can't remember whether I think this might have been in one of your blogs, and you talked about a very early childhood experience that you had when you were in India, where you met a young girl of a similar age to you, and the experience of, I'm just going to call it that shift, and I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit further on that.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite stories. So I was about 7. I grew up in Southeast Asia, and I was really blessed that my parents brought my sister and I just around the world every year. We went someplace different. So we were in India, and where my head was at the time, I was worried about my shoes, because I had white shoes, and I'm like, it's so dirty here. So I was not connected to my environment. But I'd look up, and there's this little girl walking towards me, and we're about the same height, about the same age, and our eyes locked. And I registered right before this connection happened that she was in rags, that she was barefoot, that her hair was really ratty and messy, and that I was like super clean, had parents, like just the differences. And then our eyes met. And in that moment, we just both completely fell in love with each other. It's the best way I can describe it. I don't even know how to describe it, but like everything else disappeared. And there was just this intense joy and recognition and like, oh, hello, that happened between us. And then we passed. And it was probably a 5-10 second encounter. And of course, I never saw her again. But my life was different after that. I recognized the places where we think we're separate from the world or from other people, we're all so similar. We have the same yearnings and the same desires and the same capacity to love, regardless of our circumstances.
Yeah, beautiful. I thought that was such a beautiful story. And was that the beginning of your, I'll call it awakening, that might not be the right word, was that the beginning of your transformation, do you think? Was that one of the pinnacles?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. And it's interesting because at that time we were living in Hong Kong, and I remember this yearning that I had. And that yearning was, I think all of us have yearnings. The yearning is like what we're going towards. And my yearning was, I would see people outside doing Tai Chi and doing different things of like, I could tell they were quiet, they were connected. And then to have that experience of connection was like, oh, okay. And so then to follow the yearning and to let that lead me, to not try and like fix the yearning or do something with the yearning, but just be like, something's leading me. And I think that's so often in our relationship with life of there's something we're wanting, and to just keep listening to the guidance to move towards it.
And what I was reading through that, and when I was reading that and listening to you, it's that difference between that flow of leaning into or flow with something versus trying to force or push something when it's not, that readiness phase, which obviously taps into the different energies of that you're expressing, that you talk about there as well. One of the the reason I actually brought that up, because there's a question I always like to ask, and I was curious as to how you would actually answer this question, and that was around, what do you wish you knew now? What do you know now that you wish you'd known earlier? And do you have those sort of thinkings based on that your journey started so early?
It's such a beautiful question.
Yeah.
I do wish that I remembered that there is a river that's moving. And that we don't have to paddle on the river all the time. I feel like in my young enthusiasm and like needing to be perfect and wanting to do it right, I had this place of like, I have to paddle all the time. I'm the one that's making this happen.
Yeah.
And the truth is there was always a river carrying me. And there's a lot of times actually putting the paddles down and letting the river carry is the correct move.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wish I had been able to integrate and embody that earlier.
Yeah, that's such a great lesson. Yeah, such a great lesson. So I'll just recap it, and please feel free to do the same. So what I've just heard there for myself is that we don't have to continually be paddling in our boat. We can actually put the oars inside the boat and be carried through the flow of the river. Did I capture that
Absolutely. Correctly? Yeah. Yeah,
such a great lesson, and that ties in obviously to the cycles that we've been talking around and the energies as well. And does that then tie into that ability to be able to put the oars in the boat and be carried down the river? Does that tie into you've got a phrase that was called deep listening, and I'd love you to expand and explain that a little bit further as well.
Absolutely. That definitely ties in with the wise energy and the capacity to stop and get quiet and wait for information to come to us rather than seeking or trying to figure it out. Like our minds are so powerful, and they're also not often the most helpful thing. And sometimes we jump in and we think about, oh, like this happened in the past, and so therefore I have to respond to it this way, or I have this old hurt, and so therefore I'm going to protect myself this way. And the wise energy says, stop, sweetheart. Just stop for a minute, get quiet, recenter into your heart, get still, get empty, let yourself be carried. You're part of something larger. And now listen, what's the next place? What's the next focus? And I've just found that to be so much more trustworthy than my head.
Oh, I love that. So much more trustworthy than your head. Wow, that's incredibly powerful. So that was the deep.
That's the deep listening.
That's still landing for me. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll share a business story that, this happened 2 months ago, I think, is we had a launch. I do online programs. We had a launch. It completely bombed. Like, it did not do anything like we hoped it would. And I started getting frantic. I started feeling myself like, okay, I've got to start paddling, and literally like trying to, metaphorically take the paddles from my team. And I basically said to my team, you get to run everything. And I kind of jumped out of the boat. Yes. And I'm like, okay, let me get myself back in the boat. And we all use this metaphor. My beautiful coworker, Serena, is like, I've been trying to keep you in the boat. I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. I'm back in the boat now. And I said, and here's what I need. And I had to get really quiet to make this decision because I felt the frantic old pattern coming to grab me. And I wrote my team and I'm like, you all have a week off paid. I'm sending you a bonus. I need you to go rest and get rejuvenated. And I'm doing the same thing. And whatever work has to happen, Otherwise, everybody go get still and get rested. And it was a complete opposite of what I would have normally done, which is paddle harder. We're sinking. Yes. And it was like, put the paddles down.
Yes.
And it changed everything. It's actually been just the biggest gift of what has happened since then. But it was scary. It was scary to do that.
Yeah. For those guilty control freaks who can and does do that on occasion, but not quite as often as I should. That's such a great reminder, and I think that then stems into that the ability to stay steady, which I know you talk about as well.
Yes, and that if we've chosen to get into the boat of running a business, that we're not the only ones paddling, and that I think entrepreneurs, like I know almost all the entrepreneurs that I do have some level of control, like want to control things because they know where they're going, right? Yes. And there's a leadership aspect to that, which is incredibly helpful, but it can easily go into fear. And then everybody give me your paddles. You're screwing up. I'm paddling the boat. I knew I couldn't trust any of you, like can easily get caught into the old pattern. And so to laugh at ourselves and be able to say, right, I'm scared, but I'm in this boat with other people. And are these the right people? Like I've also had to let somebody go recently because I realized I'm trying to keep somebody in the boat it's not quite right. And I love this person. It was really hard, but I'm like, and as a leader, I need to be honest about where we're going. And if somebody's not paddling in the way that's actually in deep service to where we're going, it's better for them to find a place that they're in alignment and that they're really wanted rather than us like, we're going to drag this person along.
Yeah.
It's not serving anybody.
It comes back to the, dragging the anchor along in the boat scenario, doesn't it? From that perspective that I would imagine that if you guys had tossed an anchor over on that sort of really rugged river, God knows where that roller coaster ride would continue, and obviously the boat would get broken up. And that's been incredibly great visual analogy for me, having had some experience on the water as I was reading little tidbits of it. So that's been extraordinary. Thank you. One of the other questions that I was going to ask, and I see you get asked this a lot, and I love that you actually created a blog post around this because you've written 9 books, and obviously you've got this new one, which I'd love you to come back to expand a little bit more on the book again as well, is when someone has created as many books as you have, where does somebody new start with you? What book do they start with? And should they start with that one?
Yeah, I always ask people when they have that question of like, what are you working with in your life right now? Because each of the books has a slightly different flavor and a different message and guide. And I really think of them all as different beings that have now grown up and are doing their own thing. So when I can hear someone say, this is what I'm working on, I'm like, oh, this book. Yeah. And if you want to like jump in, I'd say there's 2 good jumping in places. One is my first book, which is called The Little Book of Big Freedom. And that book's all about transformation and change. And I wrote that book when I was in apprenticeship with Don Miguel Ruiz, who's the author of The 4 Agreements, who's a deep mentor for me for a really long time. And it came out of realizing that I was surrounded by really powerful people who were on like a deep healing path. And we all kept going back into old patterns again. I'd watch us make these huge changes and then go back to old patterns. And so that was where that book came out of, like, okay, how do we actually make sustainable change in our lives that sticks?
Yeah, beautiful.
And the second one is Warrior Goddess Training, which is really a book for everybody. It was geared towards women, but I have a lot of male friends and that have read that book and loved it because it's a deep teaching of 10 different lessons of how to be in relationship with ourselves in a new way. It's a really, really yummy book.
Exploratory book by the sounds of that. So I'm going to ask you to come back to this new book, but I'm going to just preempt it with a quote that I saw. I'll call it a testimonial because there's obviously been people that have actually read the book because the book's not out until July 30th. Is that correct? Yep.
Correct. Yes.
And this was one of the little quotes which I loved, and I really, really got the sense of from that little bit that I've read and sort of explored and discovered and devoured as part of my research. And that was, Wild, Willing and Wise isn't a book you finish, it's a portal you enter. And that just gives me goosebumps even saying that. So you've expressed and explained that, the new living journey of the two books that you shared with us. Talk to us about that, the living journey and the entity that this book and portal is to become.
Yes. Well, I love the irony in a way that this book started as a very serious memoir of one of the most difficult times in my life. And I finished the first rough draft and I was like, do I really want to work on this book? Because it was so heavy and so emotionally draining, and like, I was like digging in the trenches. And I will get back to that book, but I just recognized the world really right now, like we've all been through so much. It's such a hard time, and our capacity is so diminished right now. Our faith of like what's coming next, like there's been so much disruption that I wanted to write a book that was gentle and really funny, and that would give us the capacity to laugh at ourselves and kind of laugh at how just wild this ride can be, and also give skills of how to ride that river of life, and that give permission to play, give permission to be wild. And that's where I've been kind of surprised at how much the wildness aspect has resonated with people, of how many people are like, I've lost my wild. Oh, no wonder I feel so brittle and dry. I need wild back.
Yeah.
So that's been a really beautiful gift to see.
Yeah, that's such a great scenario too. And I think I've been, now that you've expressed it in that manner, I've been hearing through our communities a similar thread that, when it's happening to you, you think you're the only one that's tired and feeling brittle and, those sorts of things. But when you allow the expression of saying what's going on in your world, you actually realize that it's actually going on for so many other people. And I think that that common thread of, dry and brittle and lost the wild is very, very true of what's going on in the world. And I can only imagine through my own experience, when you lose your wild, the willingness diminishes as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. And then you start, like, just your boat starts getting caught in eddies and bumping against the rocks, and everything's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to reclaim that spark again, how to find it. And, it's taken me a while now there's been a lot I've been undoing around putting a new book out. And it's been such a fun journey to like get back to that, like, we'll see what happens. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, with all of the different comments that I was reading of people that have read it earlier, that's obviously also continued to ignite that spark for you to continue with the journey and the sharing, etc. as well. Yeah.
Exactly.
Isn't it amazing what happens when we start a journey with an intention and purpose and intention of that gift, the gift of giving, etc. as well.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah. So can I, no, please continue. Go.
Just that so, I was taking a dance, of all things, like a dance class, and a particular form of dance that this person had created. And they shared that they felt like they had given birth to something and it now had its own life. And I was like, oh, that's so true about businesses and books and art projects and children. So if we start to see that whatever we've birthed, like we may have portaled it through, but then it has its own existence and its own creation that it's bringing into the world, whether that's a business or a child or a book. So
yeah, very, very, very true. And as part of, I suppose, this impact and legacy, what do you recommend for people that are going through that birthing of something process? What's your take on the way in which to bring that to the world? So in other words, bring the wisdom to the world. How do you suggest people help themselves to maximize that through your experience? Deep one, I know.
Yeah, it's a big question.
It is.
To not listen to the voice of fear and the voice of doubt. To know that whatever it is that you're birthing is coming through you, and that you're the one to bring it into form. And that comparing yourself to other people, worrying about if it's going to be received or if it's going to work, like that's not your business. Your business is to let the spark come through and then feed the fire. And keep feeding the fire, and be around people that are also like, beautiful fire, keep feeding it. Or like, ooh, you know, that are really non-judgmental, that are like, you know, that piece of cement you just threw in the fire, that might not be serving you. You know, that we really need community when we're birthing things.
Yes.
And we need community that deeply supports us and is excited to see what we're growing.
Yeah, I'd love you to expand on that community aspect, because I think that's something that we collectively have missed a little bit because of what we've been through, the disruption and the tiredness that we've sort of tended to, I'm going to use the word isolate. I don't quite mean isolate, but we've sort of shut ourselves off a little bit as a bit of a protective mechanism. I know I've done that myself, and I talk to my community, and we've got similar aspects of that. But we almost need to be coming back into that community for that spark. So I'd love to hear your experience on that for yourself to share with the communities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's, you know, how many people are like, I can't get on another Zoom call, because we were so forced that the only way to create community and connect with through this little bubble portal, that I think there's been this kind of natural, like, I'm pulling back, and then we have to find our place of finding communities locally where we live, as well as really being mindful and discerning about which communities we connect with online. And, you know, so often we get into these habits of like scrolling Facebook, and in a way we're trying to create community, but it's not really serving us in the long run.
So
right?
true.
I watch myself do that. I'm like, I feel like I'm having relationships with these people, but I'm actually not. And to stop, like, to be like, okay, you're wanting community, you're wanting connection, then create it, take a risk. It's easy to like voyeur. It's more difficult to put ourselves out and say, what am I looking for?
Yeah.
And that's the key, is to get quiet and to ask ourselves and be honest. What am I yearning for? What do I want more of? What would support me at this time of my life and this place of my path? And then seek that, step out and look for that, because it's there. You just have to take a risk to find it.
And that risk helps. I was hearing the risk helps with discernment, and I know you've used that word a few times. Is that, you know, that the discernment or the ability to be effectively discerning, I would imagine, is the way I would say that for myself.
Yeah, I love that. And sometimes the risk is you realize I have to create this. I'm having a lot of people now that I'm talking to, because I train facilitators, and they're like, this doesn't exist. I've been looking for it. I'm like, guess what that means? You get to create it. And they're like, but I don't know how. There isn't a model. It's like, there's a model someplace, and your heart knows.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the models within them. Yeah. And that's such a beautiful place to sort of start to wind things up, because that, you know, that yearning, and that it's not out there already, is the birthing of a legacy leaver. It's the birthing of something that the world is needing right now, which is why all the signs and all of the, you know, little nudges are coming in for those people to create and craft what it is that the world is needing from them, for them to be able to serve in that full capacity, joyful, graceful manner. Yeah,
exactly.
Beautiful. So can I ask you to just share a little bit as to the best way in which our audiences can get in contact with you, the best places to find you, and what their next steps could be with you, please?
Absolutely. So wargoddess.com. And there's a new website that was just created today. Actually, we finished it. Wildwillingwise.com. So that's the new book website with all the tour information and all the yumminess. And I know, it's exciting. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, HeatherAsh Amara. So that's a good place to tune in. I do a lot of online webinars, and that's a great place. And also my Substack. So I just started writing a year ago a Substack, which has just been such an incredible joy to get to write these longer essays. So that's a great place. It's heatherash.substack.com.
Yeah, beautiful. And I've got to say, the play I was having in my deep dive of researching, and I love going straight to written material and sort of finding key repeating phrases and comments from other people, was certainly part of the fun exploration and adventure that I've been having over the last few days before our interview. So there is absolutely lots of incredibly insightful and very diverse aspects, concepts, elements for you to explore, and you'll certainly find anything that you're looking for, I believe, within all that written word. So thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I will ask just one more question. Have we missed anything in particular that you did really want to make sure the audience has heard or got an invitation from? Anything that we might have missed, just in case?
One last thing is that wild, willing, and wise is not sequential. We get to bring all of them together all of the time. So just that reminder.
Ooh, Ooh, that's powerful. Can I get you to repeat that, please?
That wild, willing, and wise is not a sequential journey. It's not a line. It's a circle of bringing all of those aspects of ourself together, finding them balanced in a way that works for us.
Yeah, beautiful. So I interpret that back to it's no carbon. We're not creating cardboard cutouts of a process that needs to be followed. It's an alignment, which is all embodying.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. An absolute pleasure sharing your wisdom with my audience and with the rest of the world that'll get to jump on this at a later stage through our podcast and our YouTube channel. Thank you very, very much for sharing so much with us today. I'm super excited to now be another website to dive into, which is the wildwillingandwise.com. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing some more of your wisdom through your books. Again, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Sally.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We will look forward to seeing you again on another episode of Success Secrets Exposed. Take care.
Remember, if you want to be sought after and sold out, as well as being known as the obvious expert in your industry, you need to speak with Sally, our host of Success Secrets Exposed. Sally is the founder of Monetize Your Content, a done-for-you content marketing agency that helps you be easy to buy. See you next week on another episode of Success Secrets Exposed. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time or Wednesday mornings in Australia on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV.
So good.